You'll get nothing, my dad said after his $11 million deal. Then my poor aunt stepped in. The day my father looked me in the eye and said, "You'll get nothing," the room fell so silent I could hear the grandfather clock ticking behind him. His lawyer slid a thick folder across the polished oak table while my younger half-brother smirked like he had already won a championship he never earned. My father had just sold his construction company for $11 million, the business my late grandfather started with 2 pickup trucks and a handful of loyal workers. I had spent 10 years helping keep it alive, working weekends, sleeping in job trailers, and missing birthdays because every emergency became my responsibility. Yet somehow, when the deal closed, I was suddenly treated like a stranger. "You walked away when you joined the army," Dad said, leaning back in his leather chair. "This company survived because of me." I clenched my jaw. "I came back after my service. I rebuilt 3 divisions while you were recovering from your heart surgery." He shrugged as if those years meant nothing. "Employees get paychecks. Family gets inheritance. And frankly, I don't consider you either anymore." My stepmother Melissa folded her arms with a satisfied smile while my half-brother Tyler laughed under his breath. I could feel every executive around the table avoiding eye contact. They knew the truth but were too afraid to challenge the man signing their bonuses. I stood slowly, refusing to let them see my hands shaking. "If that's really how you see me," I said quietly, "then I hope one day you remember who stayed beside you when everyone else left." Dad didn't answer. Instead, he nodded toward the security guard standing outside the conference room. "Escort him out." Those words hurt more than losing the money. They erased every sacrifice I had ever made for that family. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed my Aunt Evelyn, the poorest person in our family, a woman everyone mocked because she lived in a tiny farmhouse and drove a 20-year-old pickup. I almost ignored it, embarrassed by everything that had just happened. Instead, I answered. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Daniel, don't leave town yet. I need you to come see me tonight. There's something your grandfather trusted me to keep safe, and after what your father just did, it's finally time." I drove nearly 2 hours through pouring rain to reach Aunt Evelyn's farm, wondering why my grandfather would ever leave anything with someone my father dismissed as the family failure. Her home looked exactly as I remembered from childhood: peeling white paint, an old porch swing, flower pots made from cracked buckets, but everything inside was spotless. She greeted me with a warm hug before setting homemade chili on the stove as though I were still 12 years old. She didn't ask about the meeting. Somehow, she already knew. "Your father always believed wealth made people important," she said softly. "Your grandfather believed character did." I stared at the faded family photographs covering her walls. There was one picture I had never seen before. Grandpa stood beside several soldiers in desert uniforms, smiling proudly while shaking hands with a decorated officer. "You never told me Grandpa worked with the military," I said. Evelyn smiled without answering. Instead, she walked to an old wooden cabinet and removed a rusted lockbox wrapped in a faded army blanket. My heart pounded as she placed it on the kitchen table. "He told me this box could never be opened while your father controlled the company," she whispered. "He said greed would blind him." My pulse quickened. Inside the box were military commendations, handwritten journals, old land deeds, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's unmistakable handwriting. Before I could touch it, headlights swept across the living room window. A black SUV rolled slowly into the driveway. Aunt Evelyn's face lost its color. "They found us faster than I expected," she murmured. "Who?" I asked. She looked directly at me. "People who desperately need that box before you read what's inside." A hard knock echoed through the front door. Then another. Whoever stood outside wasn't planning to leave quietly. Neither of us moved for several seconds. The pounding grew louder until the old windows rattled inside their frames. Aunt Evelyn quickly slid the envelope into my jacket pocket before pointing toward the back hallway. "If anything happens, protect that letter first." I frowned. "Who are these people?" She took a slow breath. "Some work for your father. Some don't. That's what scares me." Before I could ask another question, the front door burst open with enough force to slam against the wall. 3 men in expensive suits stepped inside without permission. The one in front flashed a confident smile that never reached his eyes. "Evening, Miss Evelyn. Mr. Harrison asked us to collect a family keepsake." Aunt Evelyn stood between them and the kitchen table. "There's nothing here that belongs to him." The man's gaze shifted toward me. "Daniel, your father is worried you're making emotional decisions. Hand over the box, and everyone goes home." I noticed something strange. One of the men wore an earpiece usually issued to federal protective teams, not private security. Another carried himself with unmistakable military discipline. They weren't ordinary hired muscle. My instincts from years in uniform screamed that something much bigger was unfolding. As tension filled the room, flashing red and blue lights suddenly reflected through the front windows. 2 sheriff's deputies pulled into the driveway, followed seconds later by a black government SUV with dark-tinted windows. Every man inside the house froze. The suited stranger's confident expression disappeared. He whispered one sentence that made my blood run cold. "It's too late, they got here first." Before anyone could react, the front door opened again, and a sharply dressed woman carrying a federal badge stepped inside. She looked directly at me, ignored everyone else, and said, "Daniel Harrison, we've been trying to find you for 7 years. Your grandfather left instructions that this meeting happen only after your father betrayed you." Then her eyes settled on the sealed envelope in my jacket, and the entire room fell silent. The woman with the federal badge didn't raise her voice, but somehow every person in that farmhouse seemed to stop breathing. "No one touches that envelope," she said, her eyes fixed on the men who had forced their way inside. The tallest man in the gray suit forced a nervous smile. "This is a family matter, Agent." She took one slow step forward. "It stopped being a family matter decades ago." Before anyone could react, 2 agents entered behind her while the sheriff's deputies secured the doorway. The suited men glanced at one another, silently calculating whether to run. Their confidence had vanished. Aunt Evelyn finally exhaled, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the kitchen table. I looked from the agents to the lockbox, completely lost. "Can somebody tell me what's happening?" The woman faced me. "My name is Rachel Monroe. Your grandfather anticipated this exact night. He believed your father would eventually choose money over blood. If that happened, we were instructed to locate you immediately." My heart pounded harder with every word. You're saying my grandfather planned this years ago? She nodded. Every detail. The room remained frozen as if everyone understood a truth I hadn't even begun to uncover. Then Rachel looked toward the men in suits. You have exactly 10 seconds to explain why you illegally entered this property. None of them answered. Their silence said more than any confession ever could. Rachel carefully opened the old lockbox while one of the agents photographed every document inside. Grandpa's journals were stacked neatly beneath military service records, engineering blueprints, and dozens of letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. Then she unfolded a yellowed property map across the kitchen table. It wasn't a construction site. It wasn't company land. It was several thousand acres outside Colorado marked with handwritten notes and government reference numbers. What is this? I asked. Rachel pointed to my grandfather's signature at the bottom. This land was quietly purchased almost 30 years ago. Aunt Evelyn added softly, your grandfather never trusted anyone with it except me. I frowned. Why keep it secret? Rachel looked directly into my eyes. Because he believed someone inside your own family would try to steal it before the truth came out. She handed me another document. My breath caught. The estimated value wasn't in the millions. It exceeded $200 million. I stared at the page, convinced I had read it wrong. That's impossible. Rachel slowly shook her head. It became valuable after rare mineral deposits were discovered beneath the property. Your grandfather refused every offer to sell. Aunt Evelyn wiped away a quiet tear. He always said the land wasn't his greatest treasure. I looked up. Then what was? She glanced toward the sealed envelope still resting inside my jacket. You. Before I could process her words, every phone inside the farmhouse vibrated at once. Rachel answered hers immediately, her expression changing within seconds. One of her agents whispered, "It's happening already." She looked straight at me. Your father just filed emergency legal papers claiming you're mentally unstable and attempting to steal family assets. My stomach dropped. What? Rachel nodded grimly. He moved faster than we expected. If a judge signs the order before sunrise, he could freeze everything connected to your grandfather's estate. Aunt Evelyn looked horrified. He'd destroy his own son for money. Rachel's voice hardened. He's not acting alone anymore. Just then, another black SUV pulled into the driveway. Unlike the first one, this vehicle carried no government markings. Four sharply dressed individuals stepped out, followed by an older man with silver hair and the calm confidence of someone who never heard the word no. Rachel's face tightened the moment she recognized him. This just became much bigger, she whispered. I looked through the window as the stranger stopped at the front porch and slowly removed his gloves. Who is he? I asked. Rachel didn't take her eyes off him. He's the billionaire who offered your grandfather a fortune for that land 25 years ago. She paused, then added words that made every hair on my neck stand up. And according to your grandfather's journal, he's also the one man your father was warned to never trust.